Making your own baby food can provide optimal nutrition for your baby and be quite affordable. But the question people often ask is, can I actually do that with the appliances I have? Or do I have to go and buy the expensive stuff? You know, can I just use what I have? Or what is the most affordable one that I can go get? Today I'm going to be comparing 4 different common kitchen appliances and showing you how we make applesauce and also a little bit chunkier cauliflower. The first appliance is a simple, this is an Osterizer blender. This is, I got for like 20 bucks or so at Target, so it's just a super cheap blender. If you have a more expensive blender like a Vitamix or a Ninja, that would be much better quality than this, but this is a simple, easy one that you can get. The next appliance is a Cuisinart Immersion Blender. It's a smart stick. I got it off Amazon for about $35–40. Then of course we have the baby bullet. I was given this for free, so I'll list the price here of what it is currently going for on Amazon. It's got the blender bowl and then a smaller cup. It also has a ton of other accessories. I don't use them, but that is a part of the price. And then this is a food processor. This is a Cuisinart. Mine is an 11 cup, so it is more expensive. I'll list the price here, but you can even get the mini one. They have very similar results. They just have all the different tiers of how much you can hold, and that is the price difference. I believe the mini one's like 30 or 40 bucks, maybe 50, I don't know. I used to have it. It was awesome. So this is also another option. First up, we're making applesauce. So I got my apples. They have been peeled and chopped up, and now they are boiling. I usually boil them about 10–15 minutes until they're pretty soft and squishy, just to make blending easier. I think they are pretty much ready to go. If you desire very watery applesauce, very thin, you're going to want to include more of the water that it was boiled in. I just used filtered water for this to make it as pure as possible. But if you want it a chunkier applesauce for an older child, you want to get out as much of that water as possible. I didn't use too much water in here because my daughter is 1, and so we went a little bit chunkier. It got super fogged up because it's very hot. All right, here we go. Okay, even with not a lot of water, the blender pretty much pulverized that, so it's a pretty thin applesauce. Next up, we've got the Immersion Blender. It comes with this handy dandy little cup. The Immersion Blender does well if you have a little bit more in it. It can get to all the little particles better. And so there, as you can see, it's just a little bit more chunky, which could be a pro and could be a con. Yeah, here's the blender, pretty smooth and definitely more chunky. Next up, the baby bullet. The baby bullet is going to be just like the magic bullet for the most part. I used to have a magic bullet, but it broke, so now I use baby bullet. I'd say that's kind of like in between the blender and the Immersion Blender, but more like the Immersion Blender. And then we've got the food processor. And I would say that's more like the blender, very smooth. Pretty darn smooth. So that is the comparison. You have your very cheap blender, pretty smooth, your Immersion Blender, more chunky, your baby bullet, more chunky, and food processor, pretty smooth. Of course, the texture you desire is of course going to depend on how old your child is. When Maddie was younger, I would have probably preferred the smoother consistency of the blender or the food processor, but now that she's older, that's almost too smooth, and so I much prefer the chunkier from the Immersion Blender and the baby bullet. I will say the Immersion Blender is by far the easiest to clean out of all of these. It's so simple. You just press this little button, this comes off, this is the blade and everything. You wash this and you're good to go, and then the cup just basically rinses out. So this one I love to keep handy, and if I'm just gonna make some apples to go with butternut squash or sweet potatoes, I'll just pull this out real quickly. Now with something more like butternut squash and sweet potatoes, they're a little bit thicker, and I found that they're a little bit harder. So for those, I tried them with the Immersion Blender and I wasn't as impressed. I much preferred the baby bullet for those, or if you had a more higher powered. I haven't tried those in the food processor. I believe I tried them in the blender and I wasn't really fond of that either. It just all depends. I've also done meat, and that's a whole nother story because of how, you know, thick it is. I think I ended up doing that in the blender, but I probably would now choose to do that in the baby bullet. So let's get these apples cleaned up and let's try some steamed cauliflower. And there's our cauliflower. This can boil in filtered water or in vegetable broth for about 10 to 20 minutes until it's pretty tender. Again, I think this is pretty good. Because there is not as much water in the cauliflower, you're gonna need a little bit more water in it if you want a super smooth consistency, but maybe you want a little bit chunkier. I kind of want this to almost be a finger food for Maddie, so even with that, you could just mash it with a fork. I believe I've done that in the past and it works pretty well, but we're gonna test out our machines. I'm gonna pour out most of the water here. About a cup, half a cup in each. So there's our blender, and let's give this a whirl. As you can tell, the blender needs a lot more liquid than some of the other things, so we're gonna add a little bit in there and try again. Probably just because it's a cheap blender, but not so well. So add some more water. Okay. So that, yeah, and all that's in the bottom. That's the blender. It's really quite choppy. Alright, here's our Immersion Blender. I'm doing this on high. If this had had more water, it would have been a little bit easier, but that was not a lot of water, and also quite crunchy yet. Quite choppy. There's even some whole ones in there. Because of the issues we have, and I'm going to add a little bit extra water to the baby bullet. Let's see what happens. Yes, much better. The extra water, of course, helps quite a lot. But it's definitely a more creamy consistency. The extra water is probably helping with that, though. Move some extra water in our food processor as well. And that's pretty choppy too. So that's what the food processor does. Now again, for my daughter, she is 1 and I want this to be finger food, so this is probably just about right. But we have kind of a watery, I don't even know how you would describe that for the blender. Definitely not enough water in the Immersion Blender. Just kind of chopped up a little bit. Much more of a puree with the baby bullet and more choppy with the food processor. Now, all of this to say, what is the best appliance to make your own baby food? Well, that kind of depends on what you have. I think the best one really is what you have that works. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy the baby bullet, but if that's something that would help you, by all means. And especially, like I said, they do come with all the cute little containers and stuff. We don't use those, I just use mason jars, but they are really cute and really helpful if that's what you want to do. By far the cheapest things are a cheap $20, $30 blender or the $30, $40 immersion blender, and the most compact option is also the immersion blender. But if you already have a Magic Bullet, Baby Bullet, or a food processor, or a Ninja, or a Blendtec, or any of those work as well. The look you're ultimately going for is going to depend on your child's age and what exactly textures you're looking for or what items you're doing. Of course, every appliance is going to work differently with smoother, watery textures versus harder, crunchier textures. I primarily use the Immersion Blender and the Baby Bullet now, but I have used all of these in the past and will continue to at different times. But of course, you don't have to have all of them. If you make your own baby food, let me know in the comments below what your favorite appliance to use for that is. And if you want to see more of these videos, more baby life, mommy, parenting stuff, go ahead and click that subscribe button. I do videos on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.